Black family vanished after a church picnic in 1978 to 15 years later. This is found in the sea. I never liked the ocean. Maybe that's why I moved inland. I used to tell people I just preferred the woods, or that the smell of salt made me nauseous, but that wasn't true. Not entirely. The real reason dates back to the summer of 1993. And the thing we found floating off the Gulf Coast. It wasn't supposed to be my case. I was 32, just 3 years into my job with the Louisiana State Marine Patrol. And most of my work involved either stolen shrimping boats or drunken drownings. But this wasn't either of those. Not even close. It started with a weather buoy. A routine check-in with a sensor beacon off the coast of Cameron Parish had gone silent. When we sent a technician out, he found the buoy was tangled up with something. An old wooden crate, heavily waterlogged, barnacle-covered, and nailed shut. But it wasn't just drifting, it was anchored. Someone had deliberately chained it to the seabed. They brought it back onshore. And when the crate was pried open, the smell hit first. Not rot. Not fish. Not diesel. Something much older. Like mildew and copper and dust from a place that shouldn't have been underwater. Inside was a box. Velvet-lined. And in that box, a leather-bound family Bible. Warped by moisture, but still sealed by a brass clasp. On the first page, written in ink that had somehow survived the years, were 5 names. Frederick Allen. Elaine Allen. Tobias Allen. Naomi Allen. Baby Frederick Jr. I remember one of the deputies saying, "Wait. I know that name." He pulled out a folder from archives. And there it was. The Allen family, missing, June 18, 1978. Last seen at a church picnic in St. Landry Parish. They hadn't just vanished. They had disappeared from within a crowd. The Allen family, at the time, were known mostly to locals in the St. Landry Parish community. Frederick Sr. was a mechanic, respected and modest. Elaine was a teacher's aide at a segregated elementary school that had just been forced to integrate 2 years prior. By all accounts, they were quiet but kind. Their children, Tobias and Naomi, were 12 and 9. The baby, just 5 months old. The report from 1978 was brief. They'd been attending the annual church gathering near the bayou. Families from several neighboring parishes would drive out with coolers, lawn chairs, and fold-out tables, lined with banana pudding, deviled eggs, and pound cake. At 3:13 p.m., Frederick was seen pulling his youngest daughter Naomi away from the water's edge. At 3:19, Elaine was chatting with another mother about school supplies. At 3:24, Tobias was eating a slice of watermelon, grinning with juice down his chin. At 3:31, they were gone. No one saw them leave. No vehicle started. No argument. No commotion. One moment they were part of the crowd. The next, not a trace. A search was launched, though too late. No tire tracks. No footprints leading into the woods. No clothing, no bodies, no screams. Just an empty picnic blanket and one spilled plastic cup of red fruit punch. The local sheriff called it the strangest vanishing he'd ever seen. That was 15 years before the crate. Back in 1993, once we confirmed the names in the Bible matched the missing persons case, things escalated fast. The press didn't get word right away, but internally, well, things got complicated. The crate had been nailed shut. Anchored. Preserved. It wasn't just that the Bible was found. It was that it was deliberately placed to be found. When I held the Bible in my hands, I felt something I can't explain. Not fear. Not reverence. Just recognition. It made no sense. I had never met the Allens. I wasn't even living in the state in 78. But the inside cover had an inscription that made my stomach twist. To the man who finds this, keep your eyes open. You know us. Written in neat cursive. Dated July 7, 1978. 3 weeks after the disappearance. The ink was fresh, untouched by water. It had no reason to be that well preserved. And the handwriting. It was a match to Elaine Allen. Verified from her old school records. That night, I couldn't sleep. And around 2:30 a.m., I drove back to the evidence lockup where the crate and its contents had been stored. Something was gnawing at me. Something I hadn't noticed. I asked the officer on duty to let me examine the Bible again. He was reluctant, but I insisted. It was still damp around the edges, still swollen with moisture, except for the pages in the middle. Those were dry. Bone dry. And tucked between Psalms and Proverbs was a folded photograph. Polaroid. Slightly yellowed. And on it, 5 people. Standing in the shallows of some dark, tree-lined water. Cypress knees all around. Mist rising in thin ribbons. Frederick. Elaine. Tobias. Naomi. The baby in a white onesie. But something was wrong with the image. They weren't smiling. They weren't wet, either. They were just standing. Still. Expressionless. Looking not at the camera, but past it. As if the person taking the photo wasn't a person at all. That's when the dream started. But I'll tell you about those in a moment. Because the next morning, the case was escalated to federal level. And someone showed up at our office who made it very clear. We weren't the first to find something related to the Allen family. And we weren't going to be the last. They didn't tell me right away. The FBI had taken over jurisdiction within 48 hours of the crate's discovery, and everything after that happened behind closed doors, new people, black SUVs, sealed memos. But I had one advantage. The diver who found the second object in the water? He was my cousin. He called me on a payphone. Whispered like he thought someone was listening. "You were right," he said. "It's not just the Bible. There's a car. A full damn car." 3 days after the crate surfaced, a trawler about 30 miles southeast of Marsh Island reported something snagged in their net. They didn't know what it was at first, just a mass of twisted metal and old seaweed, but once it was towed closer to shore, the shape began to form. It was a 1976 Dodge Monaco. The same make, model, and license plate listed in the 1978 police report. Frederick Allen's car. Rust had devoured most of the body. The windshield was shattered inward. The back window was fogged from the inside. A strange black film coated the glass, too thick to be mold, too irregular to be paint. But the car was sealed. Windows shut. Doors locked. The ignition key still in place. And inside. No bodies. No bones. No trace of blood. No clothing. But there were 2 objects that changed everything. The first, a melted cassette tape, wedged halfway into the dashboard slot. The label was handwritten, Gospel Mix, June, 78. The second, a girl's shoe. Child-sized. White. Strapped with a faded red buckle. The same kind described in Naomi Allen's missing person report. And stuffed into the toe of the shoe, a water-damaged napkin from the original church picnic. The logo barely legible, St. Anthony of the Fields, 12th Annual Parish Gathering. And below it, scribbled in smeared pen. We tried to leave but the road was gone. I didn't sleep again that night. Or the one after that. I drove out to the location the trawler had marked. The tide was low. The sky hung heavy with storm clouds that hadn't moved in hours. No one else was there, the area had been quietly cordoned off by the feds. But standing on the edge of that dock, I felt observed. Not watched. Observed. As if the sea itself was memorizing me. I kept thinking about that napkin. We tried to leave but the road was gone. The original investigation had concluded that the Allens must have been abducted, maybe someone had forced them into their car at gunpoint. Maybe a cult. Maybe they'd staged their own disappearance. But all of those theories hinged on someone seeing something. No one had. The picnic was in a wide clearing. There were cars. There were witnesses. There were photographs from that day. And none of them showed the Allens leaving. They just stopped appearing. Frame by frame. First they're there, sitting on a blanket. Then in the next photo, it's empty. No blur. No movement. Just gone. I returned to the office and pulled the original case file again. Every detail I could find. Interview transcripts. Maps. Eyewitness timelines. And something didn't add up. A little girl named Clarissa Jones had been 9 years old at the time. She'd been one of the last people to see Naomi. In her original statement, she'd said, "Naomi said she wanted to go find the water room before it closed." That phrase had stuck with the sheriff. They wrote it off as child's talk, imagination. Maybe Naomi meant the bathroom. Maybe she'd seen a puddle or a part of the bayou. But something about that line chilled me now, 15 years later. Not because of the phrase itself, but because of a separate interview, one conducted just 3 weeks before the disappearance, with an elderly woman who lived not far from the church. Her name was Mrs. Delilah Rivers, and in her file was a single odd line she'd told local police during a noise complaint in May 1978. "There's been people walking out near the dry creek again. Just standing by the reeds. Waiting by the water room. I did something stupid that week. I took a weekend trip to St. Landry Parish. Not as an officer. Just as someone looking for answers. The old church was still there. St. Anthony of the Fields. Smaller now, worn, but still hosting Sunday service. The picnic area out back was overgrown, half swallowed by weeds. But the clearing where the tables once stood was still recognizable. I walked the path back toward the water. Cypress trees taller than I remembered from photos. Thick roots breaking through the mud. Gnats heavy in the air. Then I saw it. A depression in the ground, maybe 15 feet across. A perfect circle. Sunken. Damp. Almost like something had once been there and was pulled down, or, worse, rose up. At its center was a ring of stones. Each one had a mark carved into it. A crude symbol, nothing I recognized, but repeated with obsessive precision. And resting atop one of them, untouched by dirt or moss. A second Polaroid. Same 5 people. Same misty water. But this time, they were smiling. Not like a family posing. Not like they were happy. Smiling wide. Fixed. And all 5 were looking directly at me. Not the camera. Me. And behind them, a door. Rising out of the water. No frame. No hinges. Just a black wooden door, standing upright in the middle of the shallows. Closed. I left. I drove back 5 hours straight. Didn't stop for gas. Didn't eat. And when I got home, I found something that made my blood turn cold. My apartment was undisturbed. Windows locked. Door chained. But sitting in the middle of my kitchen table, dripping onto the linoleum, was a second shoe. The matching pair. Tied to the laces was a motel room key. Tag number burned into the brass, room 107. The address was handwritten in red ink on the tag's back. Bayview Motor Lodge. Cameron Parish. A place that had burned down in 1989. I didn't know what to do with the key. Logic said to throw it away. Burn it, maybe. Pretend it never showed up. But I couldn't. I needed to know why someone would leave it for me. Why a burned-down motel from 4 years ago was somehow part of this. The Bayview Motor Lodge had been built in the early 60s, one of those roadside structures with a long row of identical doors facing the parking lot, a flickering neon sign, and no working phones in the rooms. It burned down in late '89. Electrical fault, they said. Whole place went up in minutes. 2 vagrants were supposedly squatting in the back units, and one of them never made it out. The land was condemned. But the foundation still stood. I arrived just after 6 a.m., while the mist was still clinging to the trees along the highway. The property was behind a chain-link fence now, rusted in places. No signs, no cameras, no guards. I stepped over the fallen section near the back. The skeleton of the lodge was still visible, scorched bricks and blackened doorways, the air stale with that heavy, long dead smoke smell. Most rooms were just black pits. But I counted carefully until I found what I was looking for. Room 107. Or rather, what remained of it. A scorched concrete square, the remains of a metal bed frame rusted against the wall. Nothing left. Until I noticed the floor. It was different from the rest. Not just in color, the slab had been patched, filled with a different type of cement. Newer, rougher, sloppy, and etched into the surface, hidden under the dirt and ash, was something I hadn't expected to see again. One of the same symbols I'd seen near the sunken clearing. Etched with a stick or knife. Carved before the cement dried. Someone had sealed something here. I didn't have tools with me, just a flashlight and an old tire iron I kept in my trunk. It took me 40 minutes to chip through the top layer, and then I heard it. A hollow clang. There was something underneath. I scraped more. Cleared the dirt. Pulled back the broken cement. And beneath it, embedded in the floor like a time capsule, was a rusted steel hatch. Bolted shut from the outside. I wasn't alone. The sound of a twig snapping behind me made my spine lock. Then another step. Then silence. I turned slowly. The clearing between the trees was empty. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then a voice, low and hoarse, maybe 10 feet to my left. They weren't supposed to come back. I didn't see him until he stepped forward. Older man. Weathered. Skin like tree bark, hair thin and white. His clothes hung off him, like they'd been soaked and dried 100 times. He stared at the hatch, not me. I locked it, he said. I was there. When it opened. We thought the fire would stop it. I asked him who he was. His voice cracked. Caretaker. Watchman. Don't matter now. It's late. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph, a duplicate of the one I'd found in the Bible. Found this at the base of the church bell, he whispered. 2 days after they vanished. Not before. Then he turned and walked into the trees. Didn't say another word. I never saw him again. The hatch was too corroded to open then and there. But I wasn't giving up. Back in Baton Rouge, I filed a report about potential arson evidence in a cold case. Gave just enough truth to get permission to return with equipment. I didn't mention the photograph. Or the symbols. Or the missing shoe on my kitchen table. I was careful. Too careful, maybe. Because by the time I got back to the Bayview ruins 2 days later, room 107 was gone. Not just the hatch. The whole room. The entire slab had been torn up. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt. The hatch gone. The concrete smashed. And at the edge of the lot, pinned to the fence with a nail, a page torn from the Bible. Psalm chapter 69. Deliver me out of the mire, and let me not sink. Let me be delivered from them that hate me, and out of the deep waters. I wasn't the only one searching anymore. That much was clear. Someone, or something, was trying to erase the trail. I went back to the original church site, desperate for another clue. This time I brought a local historian with me, an older woman named Lisette Guidry who specialized in Creole folklore and rural religious practices. She noticed the stone circle immediately. These are Vives, she said. But not ones I've seen. Could be local adaptations. Protective symbols. Wards. Wards against what? I asked. She stared into the center of the ring for a long time before replying. Not what. Where. She helped me trace local myths. We found something, an obscure passage in a 1912 parish journal, describing a ritual site along the bayou where doors sometimes opened, and people were seen twice in the same day, one laughing and one crying. It didn't make sense. Not until we spoke to an elderly man named Louis Baptiste, who'd lived in St. Landry all his life. He remembered the Allens. I was fishing that day, he said. Just downstream of the picnic. Heard singing. Then it stopped all at once. Not quiet, just cut. Like someone pinched the air. And then he told us something no one else had. Next morning, he said, my wife found a piece of mirror on our porch. Cracked. Still had a fingerprint on it. But when we brought it inside, the reflection wasn't ours. He looked at me, and I saw a weight in his face. It was that man. Frederick. But older. Looking right at me. Something was bleeding between places. And now, 15 years later, it was bleeding again. I finally got a call from the lab about the melted cassette recovered from the Dodge. Despite the damage, they'd managed to extract audio from the last 30 seconds of tape. The tech warned me before playing it. Said it didn't sound right. There was static. Then the opening chords of a hymn, one I recognized from Baptist services, then a voice, whispering behind the music. It wasn't one of the Allens. It wasn't anyone. Just this. You opened the room. You heard it breathe. The names are still written. They are not gone. They are not gone. They are. Then the tape cut. I made one last visit to the sea. To the very coordinates where the car was found. Rented a boat. Took a sonar scanner. And on the second day, I found something strange on the ocean floor. A wide, circular disturbance in the sand. Too even to be natural. At its center, an object. Not metal. Not organic. Wood. A door. Just like the one in the photograph. Still standing. Still closed. There's something that happens to a man when he sees a door standing upright at the bottom of the sea. It rearranges things inside your head. I stared at that sonar image for hours. Ran it past 2 other analysts. One thought it was a glitch. The other thought it was a shipwreck anomaly. But I knew better. The shape was too clean. Too vertical. And there was something else, something they didn't notice. A shadow beside the door. Not cast by the object itself. Not shaped like a fish or equipment. A silhouette. Slender. Upright. Still. Like someone standing next to the door, waiting for it to open. I sent the scan to a contact I had at NOAA, asking for a secondary review under a fake project title. She got back to me 2 days later. You didn't tell me this was a repeat, she said. A repeat of what? I asked. She sent me a file from 1979, a recovered image from a failed coastal research drone. The shape in the image was the same. Not similar. Identical. And in the notes was a mention I hadn't seen before. Structure resembles freestanding doorway. Origin unknown. Visibility poor due to sudden thermal inversion. The location? Roughly 5 nautical miles from where the Allen car was found. Date of recording? July 7, 1979. Exactly 1 year after the family vanished. I tracked down the drone's original operator. Retired now. Living in Alabama. He agreed to meet me for lunch. His name was Emmett Clay. Former Navy, later NOAA. He didn't say much at first. Just kept tapping the table. Asked me if I believed in event echoes. I asked what he meant. Sometimes, he said, the world doesn't seal cleanly. Like a wound that tries to scab but keeps breaking open. He took a sip of coffee and added. Back then, we picked up signals. Magnetic anomalies. Feedback loops. But what scared us wasn't the data. It was the sound. I leaned in. What sound? He didn't answer. Just pulled out an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. And pressed play. It began with static. Then came a slow, rhythmic knocking. 3 beats. A pause. Then 3 more. Then something like a whisper, not in English. Or any language I recognized. Just syllables. Soft. Circular. almost sung. And underneath it, something deeper. Like a low hum of thousands of voices just below the audible range. Then a click. And then silence. "Where did you record this?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Right above the structure. A week before one of our crew went missing." He never elaborated. By then, the Allen case was officially closed, again. The FBI had filed it as historical unresolved. The Bible, the car, the cassette, all sealed in evidence lockers. But I couldn't let it go. Especially not after what happened next. Because 3 weeks later, mid-August, a fisherman off the coast of Texas reported something unusual tangled in his nets. Not a crate this time. Not a car. A human hand. Preserved. Pale. No signs of decomposition. Still attached to a wrist bone, but cleanly severed, as if surgically removed. DNA testing confirmed the impossible. It belonged to Tobias Allen. You have to understand, that broke everything. If Tobias had died in 1978, the tissue couldn't have survived intact at sea for 15 years. But if he hadn't died, where had he been? Why only a hand? The coroner's notes added more questions. Unusual scarring around wrist suggests high compression. Bone shows signs of pressure-related deformation consistent with deep-sea conditions. No trace of marine bacteria on the skin. Tissue behaves as if preserved in non-biological medium. No water damage. No salt exposure. No bloating. It was as if the hand had been removed just hours before discovery, and yet the DNA matched 15-year-old Tobias exactly. No aging. No degradation. I drove back to the old church one last time. Not to look for clues. Just to stand there. To feel the place. It was dusk. The crickets were loud, but underneath them I could swear I heard something else, the faint echo of a hymn. Familiar. Faint. And then I saw the boy. Standing at the edge of the trees. He looked to be 12, the age Tobias was when he vanished. He was dressed in 1970s clothing, plaid shirt, dark jeans, white sneakers. He didn't move. Didn't run. Just watched me. And when I called out, he lifted his hand. Not to wave. Not to greet. He lifted his left arm, and it was missing from the elbow down. Then he turned, stepped back into the trees, and vanished. I ran after him. But there was nothing. Just the fading trail of footprints in the pine needles. And something else. A small, fabric patch caught on a branch. A Boy Scout merit badge, soaked through, decades old. But still legible. Camping, Troop 414. The troop Tobias belonged to. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The family had vanished in public. Their belongings reappeared one by one. Their images surfaced in places they shouldn't have been. And now, part of the boy was back. Not dead. Not alive. Returned. In pieces. That night, my dreams changed again. I saw the Allen family standing in the doorway beneath the sea. Only now the door was half open. Behind it, shadows moved like smoke in slow motion. No clear form, just motion and intention. Elaine was crying. Frederick held the baby. Naomi and Tobias stood still. And one by one, they turned to me. Each one mouthed a single word. I couldn't hear it. But when I woke, it was still echoing in my head. Below. I returned to Emmett Clay and asked him directly. "What's under that door?" He was quiet for a long time. Then said, "We don't know. But it's older than the coastline. It's older than the trees. And it's not always closed." I became obsessed with the date, July 7, 1978. Everything spiraled outward from that moment. The last known sighting of the Allen family. The note in the Bible dated 3 weeks after their disappearance. The drone footage from the sea. The whispers. The dreams. So I dug. I scoured the St. Landry Parish newspaper archives, searching for anything that happened on or near that date. Accidents, missing persons, weather anomalies. And I found something. Not in the front pages, but buried in a local column under oddments and events. Local man reports time loss while driving near Durald Swamp Road. Says clock skipped ahead by 4 hours. No memory of stopping. Woke up parked on shoulder. Reports feeling soggy and sunburned. The man's name wasn't listed in the article. But I cross-referenced every hospital intake around that area within a 24-hour window. And there he was, Royce Clifton, admitted at 2:13 a.m. on July 8 for mild dehydration, disorientation, and exposure. Lived 2 towns over. Worked for the gas company. Never reported missing, because no one noticed he was gone. But he was. For at least 4 hours. I tracked him down. He was in a care facility now, early stages of dementia, but when I said the words Durald Swamp, he sat up straight. He gripped my wrist and stared at me with glassy, distant eyes. I saw them, he whispered. But they weren't right. He told me, haltingly, that he remembered parking to smoke a cigarette. That something caught his eye in the water. A ripple. A reflection. Then the world skipped. He remembered standing somewhere. But not on land. Felt like a stage, he said. Wood underfoot. But no walls. Just sky. And them. Who? I asked. The family, he said. A man with a baby. 2 kids. And a woman, holding a candle. He trembled. She looked at me and said, "You're too early." Then everything went black. I asked him what he meant by not right. He said, "They didn't blink." I started looking for others who'd been in the area around the disappearance. Found an old church member named Geraldine Miss Jerry Polk, who'd been a teenager at the picnic. Now in her 50s, ran a bait shop not far from the coast. She hadn't been interviewed in the original investigation. When I brought up the Allens, her eyes went wide. "You're the second person to ask me that this year," she said. I paused. Who was the first? She frowned. Some white man. Wore a priest collar. Showed me a picture of the baby. Asked if I'd seen him recently. I asked her when this happened. Easter Sunday, she said. This year. I checked the calendar. April 11, 1993. The same day the Bible crate was found tangled in the ocean beacon. She told me something else. That after the picnic, when people were packing up, she'd gone to the edge of the trees to look for her lost sunglasses. Thought maybe they fell near the old trail. And she'd seen Naomi Allen standing just inside the woods. Not scared. Not lost. Just watching. I called her name, Miss Jerry said. She smiled. But it was the weirdest smile I ever saw. And then she turned and walked behind a tree. She say anything? I asked. She said, "We're almost done." I went back to the lab to review the photographs again, the original Polaroid, and the second one I found at the site with the ring of stones. I hadn't noticed it before. But in the second photo, the one where they were smiling, the family stood ankle deep in the water. And beneath the surface, if you brightened the photo just enough, you could just barely make out shapes. Figures. More than 5. Hands. Faces. Leaning up from below. Distorted by the water. Not reaching, not lunging. Mirroring. Like a second family beneath them. Reflections that didn't quite match. I did something I swore I wouldn't. I called my mother. She used to teach at the same elementary school where Elaine Allen worked. She'd known her, once. And though she hadn't spoken about the case in years, I could hear her breath catch the moment I said the name. She came to see me, you know, my mom said. Elaine? 3 weeks after they vanished. I froze. She knocked on my door at dusk. I remember because the sky looked strange that evening. Like it was stuck between red and gray. What did she say? She asked if I still had the old hymn books from the school choir. I told her I did. She smiled, and then she said, and I'll never forget it, "Good. We're coming back to finish what we started." Single quote. My mom swore it was Elaine. Same dress she used to wear. Same calm voice. But her eyes were wrong. Too still, my mother said. Too shiny. She said Elaine reached out to touch the hymn book, and when she did, her hand left behind a print not of skin, but of water. I began to lose time. Small things, at first. A call I didn't remember making. A receipt for gas from a town I hadn't visited. A parking ticket for my car left near the docks, though I'd been home all day. Then I found a note in my own handwriting. Slipped under my pillow. It read, "You opened the room. The tide has changed. Start listening backward." I took the tape from the car, the gospel mix. Reversed it on analog equipment. At 00:17 in, I heard something under the hymn. A voice. Human. Familiar. Frederick Allen. Saying, "We've learned the shape of things. We followed the edge of time. The door is both ways. He let us in. But he won't let us leave unless someone trades places." That's when I understood. The door wasn't a place. It was a rule. Something about contact. About exchange. Someone leaves, someone enters. Someone enters, someone must stay behind. And I'd touched too much. Heard too much. Been too near. The Allens weren't just missing. They were waiting. And if they were coming back, then someone else had to go. I didn't want to open the box. But I did. It arrived at my door on a Tuesday morning in early September. No return address. Wrapped in brown wax paper, tied with string. Postmarked from St. Francisville, Louisiana, a town I hadn't been to since I was a teenager. Inside was a small leather journal, brittle with age. Water-stained, edges curled, the cover embossed with a tiny cross. No name. No date. But on the first page, in smeared black ink, was written. We sang to keep it closed. The handwriting didn't match any of the Allen family. But the ink, aged, iron-based, matched a sample taken from the napkin in the child's shoe. This journal wasn't new. It had been written in 1978. The first few pages were nonsense. Scribbles, psalms, repeated lines. Time is a wheel. The door is a wound. What goes in must learn the song. Then something more coherent. The water remembers. Even when the ground forgets. We found the first circle near the marsh. We thought it was an old prayer site, but the symbols didn't match anything from scripture. Fred thinks it's older. Elaine says we should stop coming. Tobias cries every time we get near. Naomi hears humming from inside the trees. That's when I realized. This was written by someone who knew the Allens. Someone who was with them. Someone who had been at the first circle. I contacted an archivist from the Diocese of Lafayette. I told her I was researching rural parish traditions and needed access to church rosters from the late 70s. She hesitated, then asked if this was about the family. I didn't answer. She met me in person the next day and brought with her a box of documents marked restricted, liturgical site closures. Inside was a letter dated July 20, 1978, written by a priest named Father Roland Mercier. It read, "Following the unexplained incident at the St. Anthony gathering, I am requesting the suspension of all outdoor liturgy near the Durold trails." Several parishioners reported a sensation of temporal slippage, auditory illusions, and one child, Naomi Allen, reportedly vanished and reappeared in the span of a minute, though her clothing was soaked and her hair was filled with silt. She claimed she was talking to the mirror people. Her parents appeared deeply shaken. I attempted to console them, but Elaine Allen told me, in an oddly calm voice, "We've already crossed once. We know the way back." I asked if she knew where I could find Father Mercier. The archivist hesitated again. Then said, He left the order in 1980. Said he'd lost his faith to something older than God. He'd changed his name. Moved to Arizona. Last known residence, a desert hermitage outside Flagstaff. I flew there that same week. He was still alive. Old, thin, and mostly blind, but his mind was sharp. When I introduced myself and mentioned the Allen family, he didn't look surprised. "You've seen the door, haven't you?" he asked. I nodded. He leaned back and said something I'll never forget. "It doesn't open from their side. It opens from ours. That's why the sea gave the car back. That's why it gave the hand. It's warning us. Someone keeps knocking." I asked him if he knew what the symbols meant. He said they were never symbols. They were notes. Musical. Part of a containment hymn, ancient, pre-Christian, passed through the generations by voice. "Someone in the Allen family found the original pattern," he said. "Not a prayer. A lock." And then he told me the last thing Elaine ever said to him. "If we don't come back, tell them not to sing." But someone had been singing. The cassette tape. The reversed audio. The ritual rhythms built into the church songs. The boy in the woods mouthing something as he vanished. I went back to my recordings. Listened to every reversed section. And that's when I heard it. A sixth voice. Not Frederick. Not Elaine. Not the children. A deeper voice. Slower. Responding. Each time the hymn looped, it answered. Always the same words. "Yes. Yes. I see you." I found a sixth name in the Allen family tree. Someone not listed in the original reports. Charles Allen, Frederick's twin brother. Institutionalized in 1964 after a series of violent episodes. Declared legally dead in 1976 after escaping from the St. Simeon Asylum and vanishing without a trace. No one had connected the two. I found his file. In it, a drawing, made in charcoal. A door, surrounded by water. And beneath it, written in a child's handwriting. I left it open. I began to understand. The family hadn't just vanished. They'd been taken back. Called, or claimed, by something older. Something remembered only in song and dream. Something that responds when the right pattern is played. They had crossed into a mirror space, a reflected reality where time and memory flowed sideways. And now, pieces of them were surfacing. Not all at once. Not in one place. Because the door was open again. And someone had to stand guard. Then the baby came back. Not as a toddler. As a young man. A fisherman found him drifting in a life raft, 20 miles offshore. No ID. No injuries. But in perfect health. Said his name was Frederick Allen Jr. Born in 1978. Exactly 15 years earlier. And looked it. He hadn't aged a day past 15. They tested his blood. A 99.98% match to Elaine and Frederick Allen. Perfect mitochondrial markers. Same birthmark described in the 1978 pediatric files. But he had no memory before waking up in the raft. Except one thing. A phrase he said in his sleep. Over and over. "The room is full now." They kept the boy in observation for 72 hours. He didn't resist. He didn't speak much. Just sat calmly in the room they'd prepared for him at the state facility in Baton Rouge, eyes focused on the wall as if watching something no one else could see. The doctors said he was lucid. Alert. No signs of trauma. But he refused to answer one question. "Where have you been?" He'd blink. Smile. Then say, "Don't you hear it?" When asked what, he'd hum. It wasn't a tune anyone recognized, not at first. But I did. Eventually. It was the same melody found embedded beneath the reversed cassette. Same number of notes. Same meter. The one used to seal the door. Except he wasn't sealing it. He was keeping it open. I stayed up 3 nights in a row trying to piece it all together. The dates. The objects. The locations. I laid them all out on my floor: pins, string, photos, notes. And then I saw something that made me stop breathing. The symbols. The ones carved into the circle of stones near the church. They weren't just random. They weren't just musical. They were coordinates. Each one corresponded to a spot along the Louisiana coastline. Shallow coastal waters. Marshes. Estuaries. And at the center, equidistant from all of them, was a point in the Gulf of Mexico. The same point where the car was found. Where the door was seen standing upright. It wasn't just a spiritual seal. It was a lock. A literal geometric lock. And someone had been breaking the pattern piece by piece. That's when I noticed the wind chimes. Outside my apartment. I didn't own any. They were hanging from a tree branch across the street. Wooden. Handmade. Carved with the same symbols. And they weren't moving in the wind. They were moving in rhythm. 3 notes. Pause. 3 notes. Pause. Same pattern as the knocking on the tape. Same rhythm as the voices from the reversed hymn. I took them down. Inside the chime tube was a small scrap of fabric, a torn corner of a hymn book page. Water-stained. Faded. But with one line still visible. Let not the door be opened by the uninvited. I tried to get back in touch with the Allen boy, Frederick Jr. But he was gone. Officially, they said he was transferred. But no one could tell me where. No transport record. No paper trail. Just vanished again. Like his family before him. But that night, I got a call. Blocked number. And a voice, unmistakably his, whispering. I'm just the doorframe. The rest is still coming through. Then the line went dead. The dreams returned. Worse than before. This time I wasn't looking at the door. I was on the other side. Standing in still water up to my knees. Surrounded by faint reflections. 1,000 copies of myself. All watching. All slightly delayed. Behind me, a forest, but not like any I've known. Too quiet. Trees shaped wrong, curved like ribs. Ahead of me, the Allen family. Walking away. Holding hands. Frederick Jr. turned around once. He smiled. And pointed to my reflection in the water. But the reflection didn't match. It was older. Wetter. And its mouth was moving. Repeating something again and again. Go back. Before you finish the song. I woke up gasping. My phone was ringing. It was Miss Jerry, the woman from the bait shop who'd seen Naomi smile at the picnic. She sounded terrified. They came to my house, she said. I heard singing outside my window. I looked out and they were all there. All who? Them. The Allens. Still wet. Still in the same clothes. Like no time passed. She sobbed. But their eyes were empty. And they kept whispering that they were done waiting. Then the line cut. I drove out there. Her house was empty. Door open. One chair knocked over. TV on, static. No sign of her. But on her kitchen table was a cassette tape. Unlabeled. Still warm. I played it. It was just one voice. Mine. I found the door. I knocked. I let them out. At that point I stopped sleeping entirely. I started locking myself inside the precinct evidence room overnight. Not for safety. But to listen. The tape. The chimes. The whisper in the hymn. The dreams. They were all saying the same thing. The door is open. The room is full. But one place is still empty. I began noticing my own name appearing. In case files it didn't belong to. In records from the original investigation. Even in a school roster from 1978, the year I wasn't born yet. But there it was. 5th grade, Tobias Allen, Naomi Allen, my name. I looked up the church records again. The original picnic was organized by 10 families. All accounted for. All questioned after the disappearance. But a photo from that day, an aerial shot taken by a local paper from a rented plane, showed 11 cars parked around the clearing. One of them was a Dodge. The rest matched the attending families. But the last one? A 1992 Toyota Corolla. A model that wouldn't exist for another 14 years. The investigator in the original 1978 report? A man named Desmond King. I pulled his personnel file. He was me. Same height. Same birthmark. Same handwriting. His signature, my signature, was on every page of the original Allen report. I wasn't investigating the case. I was part of it. It all snapped into place. The returned Bible. The photographs. The matching names. The boy with no memory. The hand in the water. It wasn't about the Allens. They were the first. But not the last. The door opens in cycles. Every 15 years. And every time it does, it chooses someone to send ahead. To investigate. To remember. To open it again. And now it was my turn. Not to solve the case. But to keep the pattern alive. I wasn't a detective. I was a relay. A songkeeper. And I had been humming the tune all along. I recorded the song. Not on purpose. I was driving south on Route 82, near the marshes where the Allen family first disappeared. I don't remember starting the tape deck. I don't remember hitting record. But when I got home, it was there. 43 minutes of road noise. Then static. Then humming. My voice. Layered with another. Frederick's. We were singing in harmony. I called the archivist again. The one from the diocese. Told her everything. Told her about the tape, the dreams, the reflection, the photo in the car that hadn't been taken yet. She was quiet for a long time. Then said, "The door's not just a place. It's a ritual. A mirror. A memory that folds in on itself every few decades. You touched too much of it. You brought it close." I asked her what I was supposed to do. She said, "You already did it." I started forgetting names. Not just random people, my own. I'd go to sign something and my hand would hesitate. Letters wouldn't form. I'd find myself writing Frederick without realizing. I'd look in the mirror and see a damp shirt I wasn't wearing. I'd wake up to wet footprints across the floor. And sometimes, I'd see my reflection smile, when I didn't. A week later, someone sent me a package. Inside. A third photograph. 5 people standing in shallow water. Frederick. Elaine. Naomi. Tobias. And someone else. Me. Smiling. Holding the child. Not an old version. Not a doppelganger. Me now. The next morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A small town officer from Bayou Sorrel, near the edge of the Atchafalaya Basin. They'd found something. An old Dodge Monaco. Abandoned. Muddy. Intact. Inside. A melted cassette. A family Bible. And a camera. A 35mm Kodak. Still loaded. With my fingerprints on the shutter button. The roll was developed. There were 24 exposures. The first 23 were water, trees, blurred shapes. The last one was me. Standing ankle deep in the bayou. Drenched. Eyes closed. And behind me, rising up through the mist, a doorway. Just like the one in the sea. But this one was open. I don't remember taking that photo. But I believe it. I believe all of it. Because last night I heard the chimes again. Same pattern. Same rhythm. Same hum. And outside my window, in the dark, 5 shadows were standing in the street. Still. Patient. Watching. This will be my last entry. I've mailed the files to 5 people. Journalists, investigators, archivists. I don't know if it'll help. But if you're reading this, if you ever find a crate in the sea, or a hymn book in your attic, or a door where no door should be. Don't knock. Don't answer. And above all, don't finish the song. Because the room isn't empty anymore. It's waiting. And it remembers your name.